a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer for FanSided. As you can see, once again, I am flying solo like a cup with Cody Williams, content director, fansided.com, working his way back from a Nashvillian wedding. I don't know what sort of trouble he's going to run into getting back home to Los Alamos, but I'm sure he's got tales. Maybe we'll be able to squeak out some time of local scouting report, if you will. But we just saw the college football playoff rankings come out earlier on Sunday afternoon. I'm going to react to those, give some of my thoughts on what's happening here, maybe some updates on the coaching carousel, and kind of looking forward to the postseason and everything like that. For the you guys, make sure to hit the like button, smash that subscribe button, give us a 5-star review. Yeah, did a great job last night. I'm super tired doing the 3 yards in a cloud of punt here on Fall Star. Definitely check that out there in the channels. Made a bunch of playlists and everything like that. So definitely check them out. 3 yards in a cloud of punt. It's a great way to see all of our reaction shows. We got season previews, bi-weeklies, playoff Goldilocks when we did that a year ago. But we've got all of our videos from the last 2 years sorted out throughout all of this. So without further ado, let's get started here with our first run of the not first run with our first to 15 of the day. Yeah. You're a check yourself before you wreck yourself. What did the playoff decide for us? So I'm going to run through the top 25 real quick, and then I'll talk about the 12-team field, first four out, and then we'll kind of work our way through the rest of the show. So at one, you've got Indiana, two Ohio State, three Georgia, four Texas Tech, five Oregon, six Ole Miss, seven Texas A&M, eight Oklahoma, nine Alabama, 10 Miami. Your number 20 Tulane Green Wave are now your 11 seed, and then your number 24 James Madison Dukes are your 12 seed. Your first four teams out would be BYU, Texas. No, it would be Notre Dame, BYU, Texas Tech, and Vanderbilt, which are ranked 11, 12, 13, 14, but seeded 13, 14, 15, 16. Utah's 15. 16 like through 20, like I said, you got USC, Arizona, Michigan, Virginia, and Tulane. And then rounding out your top 25, you've got Houston, Georgia Tech, Iowa, James Madison, and North Texas here. They ultimately, the playoff committee made a few big decisions here. I think the two things that it showed to us are if you are playing in a Power Two league, meaning the SEC or the Big Ten, and if you lose your conference championship game, they're not going to knock you out because they believe firmly that you've played a schedule that is certainly good enough to be a top 12 team if you get to that point. That's why they ranked Alabama at number 9 in the penultimate playoff rankings to kind of paint a picture that we're not going to leave them out. My hair is doing something stupid over here, but that we're not going to leave them out entirely. I think it's interesting that they only dropped Ohio State 1 for losing to Indiana, and then the Georgia Alabama game, the seeding didn't change. The other thing that they wanted to do is they wanted to honor head to head, and people in Notre Dame are really big mad right now. I think Notre Dame is like they're declining to go to a bowl game right now. That's just the ultimate soft take your ball and go home energy. And I'll be absolutely straight with you. I think they may have made the right decision here in doing that. And my reasoning for this is, look, even though Alabama has 3 losses, you played in a conference championship, you went 7-1 in your league, and you lost to a team you beat earlier in the season in a rematch. This is hard. You also scheduled Florida State in the non-conference. Yeah, you lost that game, but you have the stones to do that. Miami, whose 2 losses to SMU and to Louisville are not great, but you beat Notre Dame head to head, who has 2 losses by combined 4 points to Texas A&M and Miami. Again, they don't play in a conference. Because they don't play in a conference, it's actually hurt the Big 12 and the ACC considerably. The fact that they can sit there during, conference championship week, with a 10-2 record, thinking that they're going to get in, they're not. I always kind of felt, for as much flack as Heather Dinich is getting this weekend, I think she was absolutely right in the sense that if BYU lost to Texas Tech, they were going to drop the Cougars down, and then you would have Notre Dame and Miami ranked right next to each other. And at that point, they were going to honor the head to head. Eventually, I think the selection committee got it right, but this has been the worst group of individuals coming together with this. It shows how poorly of a leader Mac Rhodes was, which is why he was out. And they had to force Hunter Yurachek in there. And I think Mark Harlan to be the new the Utah AD to replace him as the representative there in the room and everything like that. But as I'm sitting here, this is one of those things where like every so often you'll have a playoff field where people come away mad. Like, and I think this is the same sort of thing which led to the changes after the 23 season with Florida State and Georgia getting left out. Um, but we're talking about what the 10th, 11th, and 12th best teams in the country. Like we're not talking about teams that I think can actually win the national championship here. And we have to keep that in mind. I think we're starting to lose our mind a little bit all the time in this chaotic world that we live in. And that's what we have to remember. Back in the days of the BCS, you only had one versus two. And I think the BCS would have had Georgia ahead of Ohio State, and it would have been Indiana versus Georgia in a national championship. If it was a playoff right now with the four teams, it would be Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas Tech. We'd be talking about the seeding, if you will, and everything like that. So, when you add more components to this, it just creates a greater level of chaos. And that's kind of really all I've got there with that. And we're obviously the show's for the most part, first two-thirds is going to be a playoff centric here. So that's what I kind of got here for your check yourself before you wreck yourself. So let's move on to our second topic here with some playoff Goldilocks. Who was the selection committee too hot, too cold, and just right on? What I decided to do was to take all 12 teams who made the playoff field and put them into one of those three categories equally. So I've got four for each. Some are more obvious than others, and some not so much. But this is kind of how I felt that if I had to take those dozen teams and split them up evenly, this is how I would do that. So for too hot, my four teams are Ohio State, Oregon, Texas A&M, and Alabama. And this is kind of, I think each of these is like, there's like different flavors to it, but let me explain. So Ohio State at two. As a Georgia fan and an alum, this does not sit well with me that Ohio State can lose a conference championship and not drop considerably. We've seen that happen to Georgia year over year. They went from like the number one seed to six. Like it has to be consistent, but obviously there's nothing consistent with changing rules and changing committee members and what have you. Ohio State, if they really wanted to be, with number two seed, in my opinion, they needed Ryan Day needed to go for it and not put his trust and faith in Fielding, who is the most skittish kicker of all time. It's funny that Ohio State lost a game that it needed to win because of its kicking game. That may rear its ugly head for them later on down the line. I'm okay with Ohio State being three if they were to be that. I think four would have been a little bit too harsh just because I don't necessarily know if Texas Tech has the resume or really the players to match what Ohio State does. But the good news is Ohio State was going to be two or three. People were saying that it was going to be two. I didn't really want to believe it. I kind of felt like I was on the other side of it, particularly with Georgia beating the tar out of Alabama with margin. And look, maybe Ohio State is the best loss of anybody in the country, but Georgia avenged its own loss. And, Georgia was favored in their game, as was Ohio State. Georgia won by 21 points. Ohio State lost by like three. And again, like that's the same margin that Georgia has. Yes, Georgia lost at home, and maybe Ohio State lost a neutral site or effectively in Indiana's backyard. But I think that like the Big 12, the Big 10 is not as good as the SEC. SEC got five teams in, the Big 10 got three. Felt very top heavy. I felt very confident the entire year that the Big 10 was only going to get three teams in. And it was effectively Indiana replaced Penn State, which was the team that I thought would ultimately get in. But Ohio State kind of got cocky and then kind of got pushed around a little bit here. The good news is, I guess Ohio State and Georgia get to play. It would probably be in the Fiesta Bowl of all places, while Indiana gets to be on Easy Street in the Peach Bowl versus Texas Tech, Oregon, the likes of that. So that's kind of how I got that there. Oregon at five, again, probably closer to just right, but if I had to lean a direction, I would probably say too hot because they keep chalking up their best win is over USC, who I don't really think is that good. I think they're good, but like I think there's other teams out there that have more impressive wins. I mean, Oklahoma's got Ole Miss has a better win over Oklahoma than the Oregon does over USC. Their one loss is, to another high quality team, a conference champion, and Georgia, whereas Oregon lost to, Indiana, but that was at home. Again, I think the Ducks probably should have been six, but like the reasons that they kind of got hurt here is because A&M, we don't trust them. Oklahoma doesn't have an offense, and then I think that the fact that Ole Miss is losing Lane Kiffin, Oregon kind of gets pushed ahead. I'm comfortable with them being in the 5 to 8 range. I think they're probably closer to a 6 or 7 team. I don't trust Oregon. I don't think Oregon's going to win a national championship, but that's okay. And I could be proven wrong there. I think they're a bunch of fake tough guys, not really rooting for the Ducks very much in any capacity. We'll see what happens there in the Cotton Bowl, assuming they beat James Madison or the Orange Bowl, and then they'll play. Yeah, they play Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl. Yeah, there we go. The other team I have Texas A&M. Kind of feel that the Texas loss to them is, it's one of those things where in Texas Tech history, it will compound. This is kind of what they do. They get punched in the mouth and then they collapse on the floor and piss themselves. This is what Texas A&M's always kind of been throughout my college football fandom, particularly since they joined the SEC, maybe in the Big 12. But again, I don't know them that I was a kid back then when they were playing there. We'll kind of see what it is now. This is basically everything that I've known out of Texas A&M since they joined the league in 2012. I kind of think it would have been a hard sell to put Oklahoma ahead of them, and they weren't going to do it. But I kind of feel at least Oklahoma's got a stronger identity than them. They don't know what they're doing on offense, but they've got a fantastic defense there. And I think also with the Aggies losing Colin Klein, as soon as their playoff run is done, he's going to go take over at his alma mater of Kansas State, which I'll touch on here in the latter third of the show. I kind of feel Oklahoma in a way is a little bit steadier. There's a ceiling to what they can do. I think that Texas A&M has a little bit more variance, which is why I'd probably have them down a spot if I were doing it. But again, the committee decided what it did. And then Alabama at 9. Look, you got your teeth kicked in. You got your ass kicked by Georgia. You had 3 losses. You got pushed around by Florida State early in the season. That's a bad loss. You lost a 2-point game to Oklahoma in your own stadium. You've had troubles with Oklahoma the last couple of years. I understand that. I would have been much more comfortable seeing Alabama drop, from 9 to 10, be the last team in. And again, I'm of the belief that I don't know if Alabama is one of the 10 best teams in the country, but I don't think that you can take the number one seed in your conference, the team that went 7-1, the team that beat Georgia head to head, and then completely knock them out. If this would have been, if this would have been the same sort of thing, like if we would have flipped it around and, the same sort of records would have been in place with Ohio State and Indiana. Like imagine if Ohio State was in their spot. Do you think we'd really kick them out? No, I don't think so. And I also think it's like the last thing that they want to do is to make these conference championship games. They don't want to make them not matter. Look, they want to keep it very simple. You're playing for seeding there for, the Big Ten between Indiana and Ohio State. In the SEC, Georgia was playing for a first round bye, and Alabama was playing for improved seeding. I don't think they would have got knocked out, and that's ultimately what happened. In the Big 12, Texas Tech was playing for a first round bye, and BYU was playing for a shot to get in. Virginia was only playing for a shot to get in, and Duke was just playing for an agent of chaos because they're 7-5 now, they're 8-5. So I do think they should have probably dropped Alabama, but I can understand why they did this because I don't think they want to have Georgia play Alabama in an immediate rematch or anything like that. Maybe further down the line. They're on the other side of the bracket now. because Oklahoma, the 8-9 game will play the number one seed Indiana, and then Georgia's on the other side of the bracket, so that's okay with that. So as far as where I think they're too cold, I think they're too cold on Georgia, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, and honestly Miami. Georgia, okay, I'm gonna tee this up here. How do you not move them up to two? How in God's green earth are they not the number two seed? This is probably the best team in college football right now. I had to watch a lot of Big Ten football against my will the last couple of days. Gus Johnson is horrendous. I cannot listen to him at all. And then I'm a big fan of Joel Klatt, but obviously I got to deal with Gus Johnson listening to Joel Klatt. And even though I think that it was a low scoring affair, a very good defensive battle, timely plays, and everything like that with Indiana and Ohio State, I look at what Georgia did versus Alabama. In the last two games of real serious consequence, they kicked the tar out of Texas and Alabama. Teams that everybody's kind of been a darling about. And Ole Miss, they've for whatever reason, they don't want Georgia to win a national championship. They don't want them to do this, but they kind of in a way gave them an easier path to it. And I'll touch on it more, later on in the show. But I was like, I can't believe they kept Ohio State, ahead of Georgia. I would have had Georgia I would have had Georgia at two and Ohio State at three. Maybe Ohio State at four, but again, we'll call it three and we'll call it fair there. Georgia should have been two. But the good news is you're going to be playing the winner of Ole Miss Tulane in the Sugar Bowl as a three seed, as opposed to playing the winner of Texas A&M and Miami in the Sugar Bowl. So I mean, like that's something to kind of keep an eye on here. I think Georgia kind of got screwed, but the good news is a Georgia fan, a Georgia alum, and everything like that. Kirby Smart's going to use this to his advantage to motivate. I mean, when Georgia meets Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl, they're gonna be like, they think the committee thought they're better than you. Are they better than you? No, they're not. Go Dogs. And I don't know if Georgia will beat Ohio State. It's gonna be one hell of a game. Might be better than the national championship because I think Indiana might run out of gas a little bit. We'll see. The other teams, okay, Texas Tech, they're at too cold. I think they had a chance to be three. I really did because they won their conference. They swept a team, BYU. They destroyed them. It was like I just watched this game in the NFL. The Seahawks did that to the Falcons. They did it last year, and I think Texas Tech has some limitations offensively. I think it's hilarious when they're winning games like they're going to victory formation, and they do it out of a shotgun. It's the most Texas Tech Big 12 air raid thing ever. But they've completely reinvented themselves. They have a new identity. We talked about the Big 12 being like a pillow fight, with the air raid of Cliff Kingsbury and Mike Leach not caring a damn about defense. They're all about defense now with Ben Roberts and Jacob Rodriguez. Texas Tech, I think, they're a Big 12 team with SEC talent, and I think that like they can win multiple playoff games. I don't know if they could necessarily win a national championship, but they're going to compete, and I don't think anybody really wants to play them. So I'm like this way. I'm glad that they're on the other side of the bracket of Georgia. Um, Oklahoma, I mentioned this kind of in conjunction with Texas Tech. Don't have to spend a whole hell of a lot of time on here. I just think they've got a stronger identity of who they are, more so than the Aggies do right now. And having to play somebody you already beat in a rematch at home when you beat them on the road, that's a tall ask here. And we'll see if Oklahoma ultimately does do that. But I don't know. I feel like they could have been seven. I would not have been mad if they were seven. And then Miami, look, I know people are mad in Notre Dame that they got in over Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame. And I understand that they lost to SMU and they lost to Louisville, which aren't good losses. You beat the team that you were vying for a playoff spot in. And I think having at least one ACC team in here, even if they didn't win their league as an at-large, um, does its best to keep everybody happy. Look, people hate them some Notre Dame, so I feel kind of good about this. The fact that they don't want to play at a bowl game, they're taking their ball and going home. It just shows how soft they really are. And, I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. Because the other big thing here is Notre Dame got one break after another last year. I mean, you lost to Northern Illinois and you still hit the playoff. You win 11-1. That's what you need to do. And I think in most seasons, there's other teams that were 10-2 there, like I think Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt played in the conference, didn't have a quality win on their resume, but like you don't see them complaining as much as Notre Dame is. I think it kind of just shows, maybe some of the front runner sort of component there. And besides, I'd like to see Miami in the playoff. But when they played this game, or Miami earlier in the season, just a lot more physical and everything like that. I just you can't have your cake and eat it too. But I would have probably potentially put Miami ahead of Alabama in some ways. And again, like not saying that I would have, but like the committee could have fixed this a lot earlier by saying, you know what, the head-to-head matters. Their wins are better. No, they had the better win. The losses aren't good, but they have the better win because they beat you head to head. And I think this would have been challenging to kind of do this because like look, the sport, the country, and the world's like increasingly fractured. I think you need to get to a point where those who show up and don't try to like make exceptions. Like I'm okay with the ACC having team in there. I love Miami's going to win a lot of games, but I don't know. I felt with Notre Dame like they're going to run out of gas here soon. And maybe this knocks them back a little bit. Maybe they have a massive pullback here. But then again, their schedule next year is an absolute joke. It is what it is. And then for just right, I've got Indiana, Ole Miss, Tulane, and James Madison. Don't have to spend a whole hell of a lot of time on this. I think Indiana being the top seed, nobody's going to complain about that. Same thing with there may be some people in Nashville who want Diego Pavia to win the Heisman. No, it's Fernando Mendoza. That's who should win it. I'm just glad Julian Saint's not going to do it. That makes me feel good. Ole Miss at 6. Again, yeah, I'm not necessarily okay with like Oregon being ahead of them, but I think that they should have been able to play a group of 5 team in the first round because their only losses to Georgia, and it was a barn burner, and it was on the road, and he beat them a year ago. I hate the fact that Lane Kiffin decided to blow this thing all up. I don't necessarily know if it's going to work out with Pete Golding as their head coach moving forward, or with Charlie Weiss sticking around to call plays and everything for them. They still got a lot of the same players here. It's going to be a very weird game at Vaught Hemingway with a rematch, if you will, with the Greenies coming to town to play Ole Miss. It's going to be wild. And then I'm glad to see both Tulane and James Madison make the playoff. More so with James Madison. They didn't win the group of 5. Tulane technically did, but James Madison's become a power. And even though they're going to lose Bob Chesney to the UCLA gig, they got Billy Napier coming in. They always seem to be able to reload. That's a very passionate, rabid fan base. It's really growing. They've kind of taken a lot of shine to what made Boise State so special. They've kind of become the East Coast version of that. But they won their league. They beat Troy. And even though I don't think they have a chance in hell versus Oregon, it'd be amazing if they beat them. It would be crazy. And as far as Tulane is concerned, I like that like this has become the American was the best league in the group of 5, and whoever won that deserved to get in. I may have pulled for North Texas, but North Texas couldn't run the ball, turned the ball over a lot. They were very sloppy. Whereas I think Tulane just shows how good of a head coach John Summerall is. And Florida's going to be lucky to have him here. Even though Ben Henderson may not agree with me, I think he's a really, really good head coach. So that's what I got for playoff Goldilocks here. Again, I think that the committee was too hot on Ohio State, Oregon, Texas A&M, and Alabama. Too cold on Georgia, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, and Miami. And I think they were just right on Indiana, Ole Miss, Tulane, and James Madison. So let's move to the middle part of our show with some do Hast or do Hast. Did this selection committee get it right? Do Hast 1S, they got the right 12 teams. Do Hast 2S's, they got the right seating. That's the only way I can really respond here. Again, I would have been okay if they would have let Alabama out or Miami out or Notre Dame. If you wanted to, like, don't be the last team in. This is just it's just be better than this. You want to avoid those sort of situations. And again, I'm happy that you got 2 group of 5 teams in here. They're not going to do much. It's going to be I don't know if Tulane's going to really keep it close versus Ole Miss. I think it'll be closer than the first game, but we've already seen what that is. James Madison at Autzen, that's not going to be great. But if weather's a factor, maybe they got a chance. But they got the right 12 teams in there, in my estimation, because Miami owns the head-to-head over Notre Dame. And Alabama did well enough during its regular season to play for its conference championship. Yeah, it got its ass kicked in, but you can't punish, you know, In a 12-team playoff, you cannot punish a team who's playing for a conference championship in the Big Ten, the SEC that punitively. And if the Big 12 or the ACC were up that high and we're that good entering the play, you'd probably view it the same sort of way. You're playing for seeding at that point. You're playing for buys. So I'm okay with the 12 teams that they have in here. But I'm not okay with the seeding. I think the matchups, are what it is. But again, Ohio State should not be two, Georgia should be two. And I think there's a chance that maybe Texas Tech should be ahead of Ohio State. I think that's just some real bias. Don't ever say that there's SEC bias anymore. There's five teams in, and you have one, two at Big Ten, and then you have two of the you have one SEC team, three. Your next one's at six. Come on, man. Um, I don't know. And then the other thing is, I thought that the selection committee would have found a way to avoid some of these rematches we've already seen. But again, this is the worst selection committee you've ever seen. This is the worst one in what the however many years we've been doing this. So I mean, like it is what it is. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about it. Like I don't know how much you can like pick apart like what they did. They had an impossible job here, but they paint themselves into a corner. They did it with Utah, and they did it with Notre Dame and Miami through the whole time. It was a dog and pony show for the first like five rankings of this, and they kind of got what they deserved. They wanted to come out of this, with infinite praise and not infinite ridicule. It's going to be the latter. So we have our 12 teams in here. And honestly, like I said, I go back to this ultimately with Notre Dame saying, like, we're not going to play in a bowl game now. Like, they picked the right teams because I don't necessarily know if Miami would have done that or if Alabama would have done that. I think that they would have operated. I think they would have operated with a little bit more class than that. All right. So that's what I got here with that. Let's move on to the second half of our show with we are doing a simulation. Now we have the playoff bracket set. Let's figure out who's going to win this thing here. And I wrote this for Dawn of the Dog. So our first four buys are Indiana as the one seed, Ohio State two, Georgia three, Texas Tech four. I wrote the wrong thing, didn't I? Whatever. Texas Tech, Red Raiders. It's been a grind, man. And then your four first round games are Oregon as the five seed hosting James Madison. Number six is Ole Miss hosting Tulane. Seven, Texas A&M is hosting Miami, and then 8, 9 is Oklahoma hosting Alabama. So let's work our way through here. The 5-12. You've got a Big Ten at large in Oregon hosting the Sun Belt champion James Madison Dukes. I think for as much as I want to think James Madison's going to be able to keep it close, they're not going to. I think Oregon wins that very easily. And honestly, it doesn't matter that Will Stein and Tosh Lupoi are off to Kentucky and Cal, respectively. Bob Chesney is leaving James Madison after this game for UCLA. Billy Napier's coming in. I don't remember off the top of my head who's replacing the two coordinators in note there in Oregon, but it won't matter. It might matter later. 6-11, it's a rematch from the regular season. It's Ole Miss hosting Tulane. And again, coaching changes are happening here. Lane Kiffin's gone to LSU. Pete Golding has been promoted from within. He's going to be the former defensive coordinator, is now the head coach there. It's not interim. This is his full-time gig. Then John Summerall is going to be leaving Tulane. He's going to take over at Florida. We don't know yet right now who is going to be taking over in New Orleans for him. That's one of the interesting jobs out there. Um, I keep looking at the coaching carousel. They don't have anything on Tulane. My best estimation is it might be a Miami OC Shannon Dawson. Maybe he'll go after Miami's playoff. Maybe that's kind of what's been holding it up. I also know that Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator for LSU, he's going to stay on Lane Kiffin's staff. He's a Tulane alum. He's not going to go there. But even though I think, even though I don't want to see a rematch here, Ole Miss is going to win, but probably not by the same margin. I think that there's a chance that Tulane may be able to land a sucker punch, but I'm still going to take the Rebels to win by multiple scores. Then your 7-10. This is a really great matchup. I think this is one of the ones of great intrigue here. Texas A&M hosting Miami. one of these teams is going to be just happy to be here. And I don't necessarily know which one. We'll know very quickly. And the other team's going to take advantage of that and claim what's theirs and then some. Right now, my early leanings is I think Miami is going to get Texas A&M because Miami's been begging to get into the playoff. They did. A&M was comfortably in there. They're still licking their chops from the Texas game. I think Miami is a lot more talented than a lot of teams that Texas A&M has played this year. Comparably, I mean, their Miami's talent is similar to Texas's, even though this game is in College Station. I think that there's a chance. I think there's a chance that Miami beats them. So I'm gonna take Miami in the upset there. And then the 8-9. Look, winning a rematch is so hard. And I think this is a very tough spot for the Oklahoma. I think Alabama is actually laying 1.5 points at Norman. But I'm gonna take the Sooners here because Alabama has not shown an ability to adjust to not being able to run the ball. Georgia was able to develop a lot of pressure on Ty Simpson, and Oklahoma is the best of that in the SEC. I don't necessarily know John Mateer can really be trusted offensively. What a fall from grace for Ben Arbuckle, the OC there. It's all about Brandon Venables' defense. I think you get the crowd into it. I think you win by about 10. So I've got Oklahoma advancing. So Oklahoma advances, Miami, Ole Miss, and James Madison. So here's what I got for the the quarterfinals. Your Rose Bowl. Indiana is going to be playing Oklahoma. The Cotton Bowl. Ohio State's going to be playing Miami. Sugar Bowl. Georgia, Ole Miss. Orange Bowl. Texas Tech, Oregon. The Rose Bowl. Oklahoma is going to run out of gas. I think that there's going to be a few plays that the passing game that Fernando Mendoza does that the Hoosiers just can't really replicate. More importantly, Indiana's defense is very opportunistic. Bryant Haynes may win the Frank Broyles Award. He may have taken that away from Matt Patricia here. And if Oklahoma turns the ball over, Indiana's going to win that one very comfortably. In the Cotton Bowl, I think Miami could give Ohio State a little bit of a run for their money. But I think Julian Sayin is just the steadier quarterback over Carson Beck. More importantly, I trust Ryan Day a lot more in crucial spots than Mario Cristobal. So I'm going to take the Buckeyes to prevail there. The Sugar Bowl, Georgia versus Ole Miss. Georgia's going to win this one very comfortably. I Pete Golding couldn't stop a fly versus Georgia last time around. Maybe the defense will hone in. I think that Ole Miss is not necessarily going to run out of gas, but I think that they're going to be a little bit more distracted than Georgia is, where Georgia's like, our season ended a year ago to Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. We're not going to let that happen. I think Georgia probably wins by like 17 points there. And then the Orange Bowl, I've got a very close one here. I'm ultimately going to go with Texas Tech, and I think it's because of the coordinator attrition that's coming for Oregon. The fact you've got to have another game with Will Stein and Tosh Lupoi trying to do two jobs at once will impact them. I don't necessarily know if I really love either of these teams' offenses, but I think Oregon's going to meet its match. I think they're going to play a team that's just as physical defensively. And I think that Ben Roberts and Jacob Rodriguez will force a couple of turnovers, kind of like what they did on Bear Bachmeyer. And I think that they'll win probably by like a touchdown or so. So it's chalk here. Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas Tech all advance to the quarterfinal to the semifinals. Peach Bowl, that's Indiana versus Texas Tech. I don't know if I'll be covering that game in person. That'd be really cool if I did. We'll see what happens. And then the Fiesta Bowl, Ohio State versus Georgia in Phoenix. Uh, that's going to be a Phoenix isn't going to be ready for that. I'm going to take Indiana to beat Texas Tech rather comfortably. I think that Texas Tech has some limitations offensively. If Baron Morton tries to go toe for toe with Fernando Mendoza, he's not going to be able to do it. You got two really well thought of coaches, Kurt Cignetti and Joey McGuire. I just think if it hits the fan and you have to ask either one of them to draw something up and make something happen, I think Cignetti is going to be able to do that a little bit more than McGuire. And then the Fiesta Bowl, Ohio State versus Georgia. If this were in the Peach Bowl, Georgia would be the winner by a lot, but it's going to be in Phoenix if they were to meet. I'm going to take Georgia for, I think, two reasons. The first is I just think that Kirby Smart's a better head coach than Ryan Day. It's not by much. I think it's 1-2. It's like Nick Saban's a better coach than Kirby Smart. We all know how that goes. And I think that will matter. I think that will translate into Georgia being better on special teams, whereas Ohio State can be vulnerable on special teams. The other thing is Julian Stan's a statue. And I think Glenn Schumann will be able to draw something up. Again, I don't think Glenn Schumann's up for any of these head coaching opportunities. Matt Patricia's not either, but Brian Hartline is and Mike Bobo's not. So I think Georgia may be a little bit hungrier. And I also think the fact that Georgia being ranked behind them will matter. And I think that Georgia wins by like 4 points in another really close game. Then our national championship game, Indiana versus Georgia in Miami. Fernando Mendoza's hometown versus the place where Kirby Smart worked for a year with the Miami Dolphins. Give me the dogs. Give me the dogs winning its third national title in 5 years. And here's why. This is untrodden territory for Kurt Signetti. This is familiar territory for Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's won a big game here. He beat the snot out of Michigan in the Orange Bowl years ago, back in 21, to win en route to winning his first national title at Georgia. I don't necessarily know if Indiana can run the ball as good as Georgia can. I think Georgia's defensive backs will have to play, up to standard to keep them in line. But again, I don't really know. I don't really know if I mean, Indiana could win a national title, but I don't think that they've recruited well enough to sustain this kind of a gauntlet, whereas I think Georgia could. Georgia's going to have to play Ohio State, which gives Indiana as good of a chance as possible here. I would take the dogs here. But to really tie a bow on this, I think right now, I think there's only four teams who can win a national championship. And those are your top four seeds with Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech. If I had to pick a team who's playing in the first round that I think could conceivably do it, I think there's a way where either Miami gets really hot or Oregon is just a better team than I give them credit for. I think one of them could potentially do it. James Madison, Tulane, no shot. I don't think Oklahoma has much of a shot. Alabama, I don't see that happening. A&M, Ole Miss, I think there's limitations there. That's kind of how I see it right now. And again, a lock and change. Cody and I'll probably have more stuff on that, in the next couple of episodes here. Our Thursday show is kind of already filled out. He doesn't know it yet, but we're pretty much there. So let's move on to our penultimate topic here. With some he gone, he coming, he gone eventually. Again, we've gotten through the playoff here. I'm going to get you guys caught up to speed real quickly with the latest makings and shakings of the coaching carousel. And here's everything that I've had up to date. I've been trying to keep as meticulous track as I can with every head coach. I'm not able to pay attention to coordinators as much as I want to. It's just been a really busy time for me. So start us off. Just get this out of the way. Kirk Ferentz isn't ready to leave Iowa just yet. So that's great. That's so cool. Like bravo. Way to have some worse imitation Steelers Stockholm syndrome there in Iowa City. But you won a couple of games. You had a nice year with Mark Winowski. More power to you, I suppose. He's been in that job since '99. It's like a dictator. He's like the Joe Castiglione of coaches, man. But here's where it's gotten interesting here with the coaching carousel. So Chris Kleiman did retire, and Colin Klein, the former Kansas State legendary quarterback, he's going to leave Texas A&M as their OC after the playoff to take over at his alma mater. Kansas State's not going to play in a bowl game. They decided not to. Same with Iowa State, which I'll get to in a second. Tosh Lupoi, the defensive coordinator for Oregon, he's going to take over for Justin Wilcox at his alma mater of Cal. After being introduced as Cal's next head coach, he flew to Hawaii to meet with Jaron Kive Sagapulatelli to basically make sure he's not going to transfer, and Jake Cass is going to stay. So that's really good for him. After looking potentially at Steve Englehart coming up from Presbyterian, UAB decided to remove the interim tag on Alex Mortensen, the offensive coordinator, and he's going to be the head coach there at UAB. He's the guy that beat Memphis. UAB played a lot better once Trent Dilfer was out of the building. Alex Mortensen grew up in and around Atlanta. He's the son of, the late sports NFL insider Chris Mortensen, played at GAC, former quarterback in Arkansas, handed the ball off to Darren McFadden a bunch. Really happy for him. The big domino that fell was Matt Campbell is going to leave Iowa State. He's going to take over for Penn State. And that's a huge deal because that opens up Iowa State, who's decided they're not going to play in a bowl game. They're going to hire Jimmy Rogers, the Washington State head coach, after 1 year previously at, I believe, South Dakota State. So that's how the dominoes go here. Like I said, Bob Chesney is leaving James Madison. He's going to take over at UCLA once the Dukes are done with the playoff. Replacing him will be Billy Napier, the former Florida head coach. So Sun Belt Billy is back in the Sun Belt. And then a little bit of a shock. Jason Candle is going to leave Toledo, the most well-resourced program in the MAC, to go take over at UConn for Jim Moore Jr., who's gone to Colorado State. So Toledo's open. And I think there's also rumors that Charles Huff, the new Southern Miss head coach, formerly at Marshall, he may be the candidate here at Memphis. But where things stand right now at 4:45 p.m. Sunday, uh, December 7th, Memphis, Coastal Carolina, Tulane, Washington State, Toledo are open, and Southern Miss might be opening up. I think the next domino to fall is probably going to be Tulane. We'll see if it's going to end up being Shannon Dawson or whomever. Again, those jobs are still open as well. I don't necessarily know if there's going to be any other ones that any major changes come along. It's kind of mostly group of five at this point, but we got a team who's in the playoff right now as the 11 seed who doesn't know who their head coach is going to be beyond this playoff run. So that's what we got right here for he gone, he coming, he gone eventually. I can't wait for Cody and I to go back through and kind of grade all this because it's going to be great. And then kind of an abbreviated show. We're going to get to our last topic of the day. We're going to put not Diego Pavia. We already put him in the slot. Freudian sub. We're going to put Fernando Mendoza in the slot because he just did something unbelievable. The the former Miami quarterback, grew up Miami locally, was initially going to play at Yale. Then he goes to play at Cal for 2 years. Transfers to Indiana to be on his team with his brother Alberto. Takes Indiana, who has the most losses to anybody. They've lost to Ohio State for years. This is what they do. They beat Ohio State to be number one. They beat Ohio State, who was at number one, to be number one. They've earned the number one seed. Indiana is the only undefeated team left in college football. His touchdown, or his big pass, he had a touchdown pass to Elijah Surratt, and they had a huge gain to Charlie Becker. This is also without Omar Cooper Jr. playing for most of the game. Fernando Mendoza has been the most steady player on the most steady team in the country right now. And I think that he's going to win the Heisman. If I have a vote, I'll say right now, we're going to do this probably on a Thursday show. He's my number one with a bullet. I don't think it's been close. I kind of pulled him back a little bit after the Penn State close call, but he had a signature play with a touchdown pass to Omar Cooper. He's had a few other instances throughout the year where it's going to happen. This is going to be the first quarterback taken in the NFL draft. He might go play for the Saints. He might go play for the Jets. Again, we're so far removed. All I know is the Atlanta Falcons aren't going to be able to draft him, so they don't have a first round pick. But Fernando Mendoza has been. Cody and I liked him a lot at Cal. We did not expect him to be anything close to this at Indiana. We thought he'd be an upgrade over Nathan Rourke, and he most certainly has. He's become the greatest player in Indiana football history. Not to say that they have the most proud or robust history there ever, but this is a guy that has taken a historic basketball program. They just won their first conference championship since 1954. Indiana's lost 2 games the last 2 years. They're going to probably lose again because I don't necessarily think they're going to beat Georgia in the national championship. But undefeated, you won the Big Ten. You proved a lot of people wrong. You answered a lot of tough questions throughout the year. This guy, first play of the game, he got his bell rung, and we thought he was going to be out, and they had to put Alberto out there for a play, but he came back in there and played. Had an epic quote there, just yelling and everything like that. Happiest moment of his life, talking, to Jenny Taft after the game. Fernando Mendoza is going to win the Heisman Trophy, and it's going to be interesting to see how his legacy is as a college football player. I don't know, this isn't a Joe Burrow type of season or a Cam Newton type of season, but it strikes a chord where it's remember that one year that Indiana was insanely good. Yeah, they won the Big Ten 13-0. Fernando Mendoza, Fernando Mania. Again, I wish I watched more Big Ten football, but I can't stand Gus Johnson. So, it is what it is. And this was episode 233 of False Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow my absent-minded, absent co-host, Cody Williams, at TheSizzle20. You can follow the show at CFB False Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Anywhere there's podcasts, give us a 5-star review. Really helps the show grow. Check out the playlist we've made. We're getting to the really good part of the year where every game absolutely matters. We also got bowl season coming up here too, and we're going to be doing some strange bowls. Here we come with Antonio, where he's going to be all about the Smiths. Can't really say Smiths, but he's a big fan of Morrissey, and that's really all you need to know here. I'm so tired. I'm gonna go hang out with my fiance and our friends. We're gonna go watch Wicked. That's why I'm wearing green. She's gonna be wearing pink too. It's gonna be really cool and really cute. And you guys are really cool and really cute. Once again, thanks for listening. And this is False Start.